The one thing our friends have the hardest time getting their minds around is also the one thing that's the easiest to show. Talking about this enormous level of black on white hostility, black on white, black on old, black on young, black on gay, black on straight, black on puppies, turtles, and kittens. We see every day, whether it's a talking head on MSNBC, whether it's the News Hour on NPR, whether it's in Newsweek, Time, the New York Times, Washington Post. This level of black on white hostility is now so mainstream, it's unremarkable, i.e., everybody just looks at it and says, well, that's just the way we roll around here now. Hi, this is Colin Flaherty. You're listening to the Don't Make the Black Kids Angry podcast. Here we talk about black mob violence, black on white crime, black on Asian, black on young, black on old, and how reporters and public figures are in such denial, deceit, and delusion about it. That's what we expose here every day on this podcast. Happy you're here. Hope you subscribe. Let's get back to this issue of racial hostility. I mean, if you're at a dinner party, if you're just out and about, and you or one of your friends, they see this spark of something inside of them that other people have identified as white racism, what's their reaction? The reaction is to pick up the phone, dial 911, and get a damn fire hose in there and just keep hosing it down until every little spark goes out. Don't like affirmative action? Dial 911. Don't think Asian students should be penalized when it comes to getting into colleges around the country in favor of black students? Dial 911. Think it's weird that black people get special privileges when it comes to federal contracts? Dial 911. Think it's strange that people like Black Lives Matter have open and uncritical access to the media while anybody who disagrees with them is shut out, marginalized, name called, name put on a list, gets kicked off Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, that kind of stuff. Think that's strange? Dial 911. There are so many examples of this all the time. It's almost like every time we stop to take some examples of this, it's kind of like putting a thimble in a waterfall and pulling it out and examining the contents, knowing full well that there's a lot more thimbles out there, and you could basically find it anywhere, everywhere you look. Why don't we start with the Super Bowl? The day after the Super Bowl, the night of the Super Bowl, anybody who lives around Philadelphia or watches the TV shows, or even if you don't, if you watch your internet stream, lots of people were streaming out. Some of the fans, there was hundreds of thousands of people in the street, and some of them were turning over flower beds. Other ones, there was one car that got turned over. There were some fires set. But one thing we noticed about that crowd is that crowd was diverse. Oh, yeah, absolutely diverse. I mean, Philadelphia is 1/3 of the city of Philadelphia is white. The rest is black and Asian. And so most of the crowd was actually out there. I mean, for the size of the crowd in Philadelphia, most people were expecting a whole hell of a lot worse than what happened. But stuff happened, and again, it was a racially diverse crowd that's easy to see in any of the videos. But the very next day, before they even had a chance to replace the flower pots that got turned over, Newsweek, New York Daily News, lots of other publications came out with a story, something like this. I'm reading from Newsweek now. Black Lives Matter says Philadelphia Super Bowl riots reaction are a glaring example of white privilege. Let's just go through a little bit of this article so we can see what these clowns are talking about. In the aftermath of the chaos that erupted in Philadelphia as Eagles fans tore through the streets celebrating their Super Bowl victory, many could not help but notice the difference in how the public and officials reacted to riots by fans compared to those prompted by civil unrest. Somehow it seems there's a line drawn in the sand where destruction of property because of a sports victory is okay in America. However, if you have people who are fighting for the most basic human right, the right to live, they will be condemned. Oh man, we got to go through this, because the interesting part of this stuff is not just what people are saying, but it's the enthusiastic reception it gets from this remarkable mainstream platform, Newsweek. Emergency. What's it say here? Emergency responders struggled to keep up with the rioters as they marched through Philadelphia streets, leaving destruction in their wake. Revelers reportedly ripped down light posts. They caused entire structures to collapse, and they damaged vehicles and store buildings as they celebrated the Eagles' victory. Officials seemed slow to condemn the destruction caused by the rioters, offering seemingly gentle requests for everyone to go home. The head of Black Lives Matter said this lack of the fact that the city officials did not condemn the rioters, which they did, was a glaring example of white privilege. You can riot if you're white and your teams win, but if you're black and being killed, you can't speak out. Here comes Newsweek, going to explain it all to us now. Black Lives Matter, which works to raise awareness around racial inequality and police brutality, first came under public spotlight after protests for George Trayvon Martin, Skittles, a drink, and a convenience store, blah, blah, blah. So this just goes on to show all this heroic things that Black Lives Matter have done. And according to Newsweek, they don't really get their due. They're not really as popular as they should be, parentheses, despite the fact that they're featured at will in Time, Newsweek, Washington Post, New York Times, Baltimore. Every major media news outlet in America has given Black Lives Matter a free pass, including Fox. Well, maybe Fox beats them up a little bit, but everybody else, they get a free pass. There is no opposition to Black Lives Matter that's what you would think if all you did was listen to the radio or watch TV or read newspapers. All you would see is these heroic people out there talking about relentless black victimization to relentless white racism all the time, everywhere. That explains everything. And any schmuck who stands up and says, hey, wait a minute, the opposite of that is true. Do you mind if I talk about that for a minute? Oh, no, Colin, we're not going to have you on our show because you're too controversial. Oh, okay, whatever. I mean, this same story ran in newspapers all across the country. How cops treat rioting Eagles fans versus protesting people of color. New York Daily News had the same story over and over and over. The guys up in New York are very unhappy that the cops in Philadelphia did not break a lot of white heads, because apparently there were 200,000 white people out there doing nothing but rioting. It's amazing how in all these stories, everybody kind of jumps over the facts and they get right to the conclusions, right? It's like, hey, wait a minute, can we talk about what actually happened? Oh, no, don't worry about it, Colin. Just assume that all the white people were out there rioting because that's what they do all the time. Hey, wait a minute, I saw all the videos. There were a lot of black people out there. Yeah, did you see that too? Well, Colin, they don't count. Oh, why is that? Well, they just don't. Okay, whatever. You know, the weird thing about Philly is, again, sticking to the facts, There have been lots and lots of examples of large groups of black people getting together in Philly. It's large, but just a fraction of the 200,000 people who were on the streets of Philadelphia Super Bowl night. And they did a hell of a lot more damage. 500 people did a hell of a lot more damage than the 200,000 people out there on Sunday night. I'm thinking of Temple University. Thinking of a few months ago where hundreds and hundreds of black people rampaged on and off the campus of Temple University, putting 6 white kids in the hospital. Yeah, they were looking for white students to beat up. I'm thinking of last summer. This happened 2 weekends in a row. A bunch of black people decided they were going to take over a public recreation center. Yeah, here's the thing. Public recreation centers aren't really public. They're private property, okay? So, your right to come and go on that is controlled by the people who own the property, in this case, what happens to be the city of Philadelphia. Yeah, you're not allowed to just go in there anytime you feel like, which is what they were doing with a barbecue and a big music box. And when they did it, cops came in and they said, hey, what are you guys up to? We're having a party, man. We got to have some fun here, or else if we don't have fun, we're going to go bunk people over the head. You know how we roll? I mean, that's what people say now. If you don't give black people lots of free stuff to do fun things, what they think are fun things, well, they only have one alternative. That is carjacking, burglary, bunking people over the head, and worse. We're going to talk about carjacking in a minute, but that's what we just saw this week down in Tampa. The former governor, remember Governor Christie of Tampa? He's now a congressman. The Republican governor is now a Democratic congressman, represents Tampa. So carjacking is a thing in Tampa, just like it is in Chicago, just like it is in lots of other places. So for the last year, about every few months, Congressman Christie has been having meetings with all the fellas in Tampa. Every meeting, it's like, well, we got to give our young people something to do or they're going to keep carjacking people. Okay? There's nothing for them to do? Well, there's not enough for them to do. We got midnight basketball. We got 1 p.m. basketball, 2 p.m. basketball, 3 p.m. basketball. We got basketball around the clock around here. We've got beaches. We've got libraries. They've got books in them. We have lots and lots of things for kids to do. Besides going around bonking people over the head, stealing their car, getting in car crashes, and killing people. Oh, that's not true. That's not true. No. For black people, their natural reaction is to go around bonking people over the head, steal their car, kill people, unless we give them something. This is what they say in Tampa. This is what they were saying on the streets of Philadelphia last summer. It happened again 2 weeks later. Same cast of characters came in and said, hey, we're going to have a barbecue with music. There's going to be a lot of people in the streets. They're going to be doing a lot of damage. They're going to be defying police and don't need a permit. And we're going to do that because unless we do that, everybody knows that black people will go out and break the law in some horrific fashion. Don't you know that? And people just say this. And reporters, they cannot scribble it down quickly enough. Anyway, and so in Philly, that happened. Huge episodes of black mob violence in both of those cases. And I'm thinking of all the regular marches and parades they have. And, no, not the Mummers Parade. That's another thing where they have 100,000 people on the streets. No problem. Wonder why that is. But I'm thinking of, whenever they have a protest rally. The anarchists are big in Philly. Now, that's kind of a racially diverse group, too, now that I think about it. But the anarchists are big, but they're big on the whole black oppression thing. So they have lots of rallies. When they do, some cop is always getting a rock thrown at him. I mean, what about the district attorney and the mayor of Philadelphia? They basically ran on identical platforms. One 2 years ago, one less than a year ago. The platforms there are way too many black people in prison for no reason whatsoever. And if you elect me, I will set you free. Rap on, brother. Rap on. They got elected. The district attorney of Philadelphia, Krasner, got elected with the full financial support of George Soros, $1.4 million into independent expenditure groups, and with the full support of Black Lives Matter, with their uncritical access to the media. Wow, that's a very powerful combination. Because usually when you have a lot of money like that, and you buy a lot of ads, you're buying them because you really can't. You're having trouble moving the dial using what they call the free media. Yeah, the newspapers and TV. Let's say you got George Soros putting all these ads on TV. You got Black Lives Matter out there telling everybody we got to have this district attorney in there because he's not gonna bother black people when they start going crazy in Philadelphia. I mean, black mob violence is a thing in Philadelphia. We documented that. And Don't Make the Black Kids Angry and White Girl Bleed a Lot. And they're talking about different treatment. Geez, on the front page of the New York Times, there was a thousand, this happened several times, we documented it, thousands of black people marching down the streets of Philadelphia, stopping traffic, pulling people out of cars, beating the hell out of them, setting the cars on fire, going into restaurants. This isn't just a couple people going into restaurants, stealing stuff in the restaurants, destroying the restaurants. This happened a lot of times. And the New York Times went to Philadelphia Mayor Nutter and they said, hey, what's up with all these flash mobs in your city? Seems kind of weird. Is there a lot of violence down there? I mean, can you help us figure out what's going on? He goes, no, nothing's happening. That's just the news. That's just the media misreporting it all. This is all on video. These are the riots where black people were just rampaging around, beating up any white person they could find. There's a guy named Joe Kennedy, unrelated to the Boston Kennedys. There's a guy named Joe Kennedy, a white guy, just in the wrong place at the wrong time. A bunch of black people came along, beat the hell out of him. He's on the ground. He's looking up, and he had more presence of mind than I would have had in that similar situation. He's on the ground, and he's going, why are you doing this? Why? Why are you kicking the crap out of me? All of you black people. And they looked at him and said, it's not our fault you can't fight. There was no condemnation of these people. First of all, they didn't even say what it was. They kept calling them other things other than what it was. It was just this, little of that. Oh, nothing really much happened. Temple University has a medical school, and they publish a medical journal, the public health department of their medical school. So the medical school went out and hired 3 fellas at a lot of money. They all had street cred. They went to, and of course the public health journal published by the university went through all the things that were happening, making up all the things that were not happening. They went to the guy and they said, this black guy, and they said, okay, man, you got all this street cred. Boy, that's really fantastic. Could you tell us what's happening? Why are the roving bands of Negro youth so angry and so violent on the streets of Philadelphia? The guy from Temple goes, I'm not worried about that. They're just blowing off some steam. Can somebody give me an example where cops in Philadelphia, during large-scale episodes of black mob violence, reacted with any kind of counter-violence whatsoever? No, most of the time they just roll in there, watch what's happening, maybe shoot some tear gas, maybe threaten to arrest a few people. Very few people go to jail. People go to the hospital, but not because of the cops. And the next day, everybody looks around and goes, what? That wasn't nothing. What? And yet Newsweek and the New York Daily News and lots of other places are looking down at Philadelphia going, oh, man, you really got a double standard there. That doesn't seem like blatant black on white hostility to you, that they're looking at this and they're making up stuff about what happened in Philadelphia on Super Bowl night? I mean, that's what happens when you have a really strong feeling about everything. Everything starts being, you start interpreting the entire world through the feelings instead of letting the facts determine your feelings. I mean, that's the essence of being a reporter. Can you suspend your judgment long enough to figure out what's actually going on? Then maybe you can draw some conclusions from it. Or have you already drawn your conclusions and then you go out searching for facts to make the conclusions make sense? Yes, of course, I know that's what people say I do around here. But I also know that they're absolutely unsuccessful in actually proving it when they say that. So we say there's an enormous pattern of black on white crime and violence in here, and here are the examples, damn it. Boom, 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 boom. Well, Colin, you're cherry picking. Why is that? Well, that's because it's not really happening, Colin. No, we've got the videos. We know it's happening, right? I mean, the videos are on YouTube, on my channel. I record them myself now. I put them on minds.com. I put them myself now because once you have these videos up on local news, they disappear after a few months if they are in any way start to show a pattern of black criminality and hostility. They disappear. Well, Colin, maybe it's happening, but white people do it too. Okay, show me those videos. Well, Colin, you're ignoring all the white violence. No, show me. That's all I ask. Well, Colin, there were 200,000 people in the streets of Philadelphia. They were burning the town down. Yeah, I saw that. I saw the fires. I saw a lot of black people there too. How many people went to the hospital? How many people were stabbed? How many people were pulled out of cars? Look, Colin, they turned over one car. Yeah, okay. Anybody go to the hospital? Well, they would have. Well, Colin, you know white people deserve it because of 40, 400, 4,000, 4 million years of mistreatment. I mean, that's what we get to. It's like playing whack-a-mole. You whack down one objection, they pop up another. Whack it down, up comes another. White people deserve it. When you start doing the whack-a-mole and there's only one whack-a-mole left, it's white people deserve it. White people out dancing in the streets in Philadelphia deserve to be tear gassed and shot and put in jail for a long period of time, Colin. Everybody knows that. That's what they do to black people. No, that's what they don't do to black people. Why do you think black criminality in Philadelphia is so wildly out of proportion? Because there's so many damn people that are excusing it, denying it, condoning it, ignoring it, out and out lying about it. You don't think black on white has hostility, has anything to do with that? We have more than one enthusiastic listener to this channel, and I'm always trying to work this quote in. I have it somewhere buried on my hard drive. I have to go get it again, but they've told me about this. I've heard it, and they've told me about it many times. When John Street was elected mayor of Philadelphia, I think this was in the 80s, maybe 90s. He looked in the camera's election night, and he goes, "Make no mistake, the brothers and sisters, the black people, are running this city now." This was a declaration of racial solidarity, and you cannot have racial solidarity with one race without necessarily having racial hostility to another. That's the way it works. It doesn't work any other way besides that. If you're going to organize your life around racial consciousness, if you think you only got to hang around with black people, that's got to be because you believe white people are deficient. And it works the other way around. That's why I'm not down with the whole white nationalism thing. I'm not down with the whole white racial consciousness thing. How's that been working out for black people? the most racially conscious group of people on this planet are black people in America. How's that worked out for them, this collectivism? How's that work out, this victimization, this victimhood, this relentless fairy tale of victimization? How's it worked out? And you think white people and Asian people should be doing the same thing? Really? I'll pass if you don't mind. But these examples of black on white hostility, relentless black on white hostility, they just come up and come up and come up with regularity. Like, I didn't know until NBC News and lots of other places. See, lots of other people didn't know too, but after we got reminded from NBC, everybody kind of started catching on that, oh yeah, this week was Trayvon Martin's birthday. We have to remember his life and why we fight for black lives. Trayvon sparked a movement that stands up to fascism and white supremacy. We need to hold him in our memories. That is NBC News. Everything I just read. Now, the people at NBC might say, well, Colin, that's really just a commentary we published from, Patrice Cullors, the founder of Black Lives Matter, a very important voice. No. You can't publish Patrice Cullors one day and and refuse to publish an opposing point of view the next day and keep repeating her point of view over and over and over for years without us being able to say, hey, you have a problem. This is your point of view. You're spreading it around, and it's nothing but one big fat lie. It's not just a big lie. It's the biggest lie. It's the greatest lie of our generation, the myth of black victimization. And so you're going to get somebody else to say what you say in your news stories, and you're going to sit back and go, no, Colin, no. Oh, we didn't have anything to do with that. We just published it. Yeah. Why don't we remind people of this holy day that, if we're lucky, within our lifetime will be declared a national holiday. February 5th marks 5 years and 339 days since Trayvon Martin's memorial service. It would also be his 23rd birthday. The day is necessarily somber. Nearly 6 years ago, Trayvon's death at the hands of white supremacist vigilante violence indicated the beginning of an escalating attack on black lives and demanded that this nation confront its overtly racist past and present. The urgency of justice for Trayvon Martin turned into a global urgency to fight for black lives, one which persists today. Is there anybody listening to this who doubts that every single syllable of what you just heard is dripping with anti-white venom and hostility? Oh, you think they're telling the truth? Uh-huh. What we acknowledge as a nation, says NBC News, in the voice of this founder of Black Lives Matter, what we acknowledged as a nation during the 1.5-year trial of George Zimmerman is that the white majority's public imagination of black people was based on their fear of us, not the reality of who we are. That's what this page is about, right? That's what this podcast is about. That's what our YouTube is about. Nobody's afraid. We are aware. We are aware of the reality of black criminality and black hostility. This is an example of what we're talking about. This is the typical Obama rhetorical technique. I think he's done it better than anybody. Well, we believe in competition, Colin. That's why we have to nationalize healthcare. We believe in free enterprise. That's why we have to take over General Motors. And we have to say that white people are imagining all the crime by black people against white people so wildly out of proportion. It's their imagination. Even though on one hand we deny it, on the other hand, in the same sentence, we will explain it. A white vigilante, empowered by his own racist beliefs. What happened to that whole people of color thing? Listen, I don't buy any of these people of color distinctions. But by your distinction, by what you say as people of color, isn't George Zimmerman, doesn't he fit into that category? People of color. You know, Jack Cashel. And I think it was the Conservative Treehouse. They did fantastic work on exposing this whole lie of Trayvon Martin, syllable for syllable. The criminal career of Trayvon, how he was caught with all these burglary tools and stolen property, and the school gave him a walk because we have to end the school to prison pipeline. The dude had professional burglary tools in school. And now his parents are on the speaking circuit writing books, and they go to the National Association of Black Journalists to standing room only crowds. You couldn't get in. And when they're done talking about how their son was the relentless victim of relentless white racism all the time, everywhere, that explains everything. The black reporters in the room, all of them stood up and gave them a standing ovation. That doesn't seem to be dripping with black on white hostility to you? Black on white venom? The senseless attack on Trayvon's life reignited a movement across the globe and pushed us to acknowledge, I'm raising my fist in the air now, the worth of a generation that has been historically disenfranchised. Trayvon and his generation have been served incarceration, low-wage, no-wage jobs, over-policing, and laws that criminalize our everyday in this country. No, we don't like it when cops catch us committing a crime. Oh, sorry, that was me. Sorry. Back to Newsweek. His murder and the acquittal of George Zimmerman left us with a sharpened clarity about what we stand for and how we should stand up for Black lives. The phrase, Black Lives Matter, that would turn into a hashtag, a political platform, and that a global decentralized network ushered in a new way of fighting for Black lives and thus for American democracy. Okay, does that seem normal to you? Or does that seem, again, like it's dripping with hostility and venom from every single syllable? There's no question that it is. The only question is, why is this point of view so popular with NBC, Newsweek, and all these other places around the country? Why is there no pushback? How did black on white, black on Asian hostility become such a thing? Where pushback is now considered to be something we simply just cannot do. We're criminalizing black people. Oh, are black people breaking some really serious laws wildly out of proportion? Well, they're forced to do that, Colin. I don't care why they did it. Did they do it? Well, Colin, no. You got your numbers wrong. No, here are the facts about the numbers. Black criminality is wildly out of proportion. 3 times, 5 times, 10 times, 1,000 times. When you talk about 1,000 times or 10,000 times, we're comparing black on white rape versus white on black rape. And now we have Melissa Harris Perry coming on her own show on NBC. Again, always comes back to NBC, reminding us that when black men commit crimes against black women don't call the police because they don't want to subject their men to racist violence. We got news stories talking about how 95% 65% of black women in college were raped before they got to college. 65%. Who's doing the raping? 95% of those rapes are not reported. Who's failing to report? And whatever dynamic is in the middle of it, I can tell you the dynamic that people are blaming it on, it's all about white racism. Yes, black dudes are raping black women because of white racism. And black women are not reporting it because of white racism. I mean, how many ridiculous examples do you want? How many recent ridiculous examples do you want? That's how many there are. Let's do this one real quick because I want to get to Jemele Hill, the former ESPN star, in a minute. But there's so many stories out there. I mean, just because this black on white venom does not just come from black people, it also comes from some white people. There was a story in the Philadelphia newspaper the other day from teachers. And it talked about how this is in the major Philadelphia paper. Philadelphia's white teachers should join the nationwide Black Lives Matter Week of Action. Oh, in case you're wondering where all the grant money the Black Lives Matter got after and during the riots went, well, it's into organizing things like this. But you've got to hear this. The article starts off, there's a picture of like, how many? 2, 4, 6 teachers, 2 black, 3 white, 1 person with a dark tan. So I can't tell what she is. And they all have got their virtue signaling t-shirts on. Their chins are high in the air. They're all happy. This is like the greatest moment of their lives when all their friends and their neighbors who always thought they were goofy ass kids that didn't have any common sense growing up, they're now validated. Yes, they are on the tip of the spear of the greatest struggle of our generation. These are teachers. Philadelphia white teachers should join nationwide Black Lives Matter in a week of action. And this is what the teachers are saying. This is by Lily Kavanaugh and Charlie McGeehan. Published in the Philadelphia Inquirer. Teaching in Philadelphia is hard. Blah, blah, blah. There's all these school buildings are in distress. Teachers have to pay for their own supplies. Large classes, bare bones staffing. In these conditions, it is too easy to blame students and family. This blame is misplaced. Ready for the money graph? Systematic racial oppression is the true cause of most problems we face in our schools, and we must play an active role in its dismantling. Bum, 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 bum. Philadelphia schools are funded in a racist way, and black people in Philadelphia experience higher rates of poverty, eviction, and incarceration than white people. Whether or not we acknowledge it, these examples of systemic inequity manifest themselves in our classroom daily when students show up tired or angry or hungry or unprepared. We must understand these circumstances in context. Teachers are white. Students are black. Our teaching force has grown whiter, with an 18.5% drop in black educators. That's bad. As white educators, we are overrepresented as authority figures in Philadelphia classrooms. This brings responsibility we should not take lightly. Passivity and silence in the face of inequity and oppression, especially as white educators who bring with us our privilege, is a disservice to our students. We have found that engaging with larger forces that impact our classrooms liberate us from some of the stress and feeling of individual responsibility for our failings as educators. Students are not our adversaries. As we face constant onslaught of systemic forces as educators, so do our students to an even greater degree. There are tangible steps we should take as white educators to commit ourselves to racial justice. So at some point, this just took a quantum leap, right? It's like a few minutes ago, it was just some talking head on TV talking, or in Newsweek, or in the Philadelphia Daily News, that we could just turn off or not read at our leisure, even though the consequences of this poison spreading through people's neighborhoods and cities, well, you can't ignore the consequences of that. But these are teachers. They're telling you what's happening in their classrooms. And so, you get a recruiter calls you up and they say, "Hey, Mary, we can pay you 30% more for the job you're doing now. It'd be a big raise. We'll give you a corner office on the 40th story. I got to, hey, but got to live up here in Philly. We've got some great schools up here." All the teachers, they're all committed to racial justice. Oh yeah, they're all about exposing white racism in the classroom. Oh, by the way, that means your kid is the bad guy in the classroom. But don't worry, they'll get over it. It'll be a growing experience for them. Of course, we all know what does not kill us makes us stronger. I mean, is that how you dream your life would go? When you shipped your kid off to this institutional incompetent warehouse called a school system, you dream there'd be people in there teaching your children that your parents are part of some kind of racist system that have been keeping black people down, and your parents and you, children, are responsible for the reason there's so much black dysfunction in this school and in black neighborhoods. Oh, and by the way, if you're to blame in the classroom, you're damn sure going to be to blame out in the schoolyard. You're damn sure going to be to blame going up and down the stairs between classes. And so don't come running to us when black kids enact a little street justice on your white children in schools, because you damn well know they deserve it. How many teachers have we heard about from white kids in black schools that go to the teacher thinking this is a place, should be a safe space. This should be a place where somebody can stop this incredible level of violence and harassment directed at them. How many times have we heard the teacher shrug their shoulders and say, "You just have to learn to get along with the black people. Don't worry, you'll learn. You'll get tougher because of it." There are parents who say that. That's child abuse in its purest form. Exposing your child to this relentless level of black on white hostility and violence every day in school, that is child abuse. And if you say you didn't know, I will say it's your job to know. I will say you were ignoring it on purpose. I will say you were in denial, deceit, and delusion about what's happening in your school. And it's not just these teachers in Philadelphia who are telling us this. Before this new crowd got in there, and I think they're going to do a better job, but I don't know. They haven't really started yet. The Department of Education, the President of the United States, Barack Obama, put out a memo, an executive order called Excellence in African American Education. It talked about the same thing this teacher's memo talked about. Institutional racism. Black dysfunction caused by white racism. White teachers picking on black students so they get suspended at incredible rates. above white students. This is all proof of white racism to them. But to the rest of the world, people looking at this even semi-clearly, the rest of the world, they know, we know, this is nothing but black on white hostility looking for some kind of excuse to justify it. $200,000 people on the streets of Philadelphia. Lots and lots of black people. The next day, there were some flower pots turned over, a car turned over, and it was all white people's fault. Don't look at the video. Enormous amount of black dysfunction in schools in Philadelphia. Oh, don't look at the videos Colin has made about this enormous level of craziness and violence and dysfunction in schools in Philadelphia over and over and over. No, listen to us. Don't watch those lying videos. I don't know why anybody would believe that. I understand why they would express these crazy ideas. It's because they possess this enormous amount of black on white hostility. And so, if you hate something, you're just going to see the worst in everything that they do. And that's what we're seeing here. But I don't understand how people could listen to that and not think it has consequences for them. Other papers around the country are reminding people, white authors are reminding people, hey, don't shut us out of this black on white hostility. We'd like to be down with it too. Quote, remembering white allies during Black History Month. And he goes on to remind people that, there are lots of white people who are down with the cause of black victimization. Don't shut us out. And now we have a science fiction movie coming out. I'm reading this off of my computer screen. I didn't even see this till I reread this story for this podcast. The headline for this story is under all the stories they're running for Black History Month. This story is called Black Panther, the movie. This is for every black kid who thought, quote, we didn't do stuff like that, unquote. Yes, Black Panther is for kids who believe that there's a secret magical kingdom in Africa where African people are living this super lifestyle with super machines, super weapons, super buildings, super everything that they've been hiding all these years, except for the occasional time it slips out on public access TV when the commentators there are talking about who built the pyramids and these super civilizations in Africa that white people have been ruining for a long time, and stealing and co-opting. And why else do you think black people are so screwed up around the world, except for the fact that white people have been ruining their civilizations? That's what black kids did not know about the movie Black Panther. Now they do. Everybody goes through stages when they kind of start seeing some of these episodes of black violence and black hostility for what they are, how common they are, how much damage they do. And when people start seeing this and they start seeing the incredible level of denial, deceit, delusion behind it, one of the first things everybody goes through, and I went through this too, everybody goes through is, hey, where's Al Sharpton? Why isn't he condemning, fill in the blank, why isn't he condemning that firefighter who was just killed yesterday in Tempe, Arizona? Just posted this on my minds.com/Colin Flaherty page. A firefighter in Arizona. I'm laughing. What else are we supposed to say? A fire captain, one of these, we're talking about superheroes. This was one of these guys that was super fit, super this, traveled the world, climbed mountains, did all these crazy expeditions, was in the military, came back, became a fireman, became a leader in his Tempe, Arizona, taught other firemen how to stay in shape. Here's one thing people outside of that part of the world don't know. When you live in that part of the world, chances are more likely than not, especially if you lived in a little gated community, you're going to drive around in a golf cart. You hop in the golf cart. It's got like 2 seats in the front, and the seats in the back face the back. What we used to call those rumble seats in the old cars. There's 4 people in a golf cart. Very, very common in southwestern golf communities of any kind, even if you don't play golf. So just a few nights ago, a fireman and a couple of his friends are out driving around in their golf cart, usually going from just one short distance to another, just maybe a quarter mile, whatever. So they're on this road, and a car comes up behind them, and it starts bumping the golf cart. If you've ever seen one of these shows about what happens when a cop wants to stop a car or a cop wants to stop a chase, they'll come up and bump it. Because if you bump it, that can sometimes send it into some kind of destabilized spiral, especially if you bump the outside bumper. All of a sudden, you've destabilized the car. All of a sudden, that car you're chasing is tumbling over and over and over, and the chase is over. So those are the stakes when this black guy came up behind them at night in Tempe, Arizona, and started bumping the car at a high rate of speed. Finally, they came to a stop sign. And this guy who, his friends say he did more living in, 1 year than the rest of us do in 100 years. He gets out of the golf cart, goes up to the guy driving the car and going, "Hey, what's up?" The guy took his gun out from inside the car and shot this firefighter in the face. And so the temptation is, when that kind of stuff happens, the first phase of going through this, wow, what the hell is going on in this country? I mean, it's not just my neighborhood, it's not just my school, it's all over the damn place. Damn. What is going on? Where is Al Sharpton? Why doesn't he talk about this? That's the first stage. It's kind of a boring stage now, so we should get past it. But at the same time, it's worth recognizing, it's worth remembering. It's only worth remembering because it keeps happening. It's worth remembering that Al Sharpton is a major political figure today. Because black people are into so much collectivism, 93%, this is by definition of collectivism, 93% of black people voted Democrat in the last election. That's what you call collectivism. Al Sharpton is the king collectivist. He's at the top of the hot pile. Every candidate that wants to talk to black people, Al Sharpton has convinced them, rightly or wrongly, they must pay homage to him. They must travel to him in Harlem, in a public place, and be friendly to him. Even if that means Hillary has to talk about carrying around a bottle of hot sauce in her purse. So Al Sharpton is still on the air. Still on MSNBC. He had a daily show. Then they put him in the ghetto of Saturday or Sunday mornings for an hour. But the other day he had a show that caught some attention, at least from me, from Jemele Hill. Remember Jemele? Jemele wants to remind everybody she used to be a print reporter. That is supposed to, by itself, that's supposed to be equal to having a PhD, magna summa cum laude from Harvard University. She was a print reporter writing about sports for ESPN. People forget that. So anyway, Jemele Hill, she was the person who got suspended from ESPN a few months ago for a week or two. When she started saying Donald Trump was a white supremacist, he was this, he was that. Well, they let her back on the air, but for some reason her audience disappeared. It's amazing how much stuff happens on ESPN. I mean, people, we'll leave that for another show. The sports reporter, the sports world. how sports reporters are so tied to this whole fictional narrative of black victimization and white racism. But anyway, Al Sharpton and Jemele Hill had a conversation. She just stopped working for ESPN, and we're going to hear her give this long, torturous explanation of why she's no longer there. Kind of reminds me of what happens to me if I show up to one of my girls' houses 5 minutes late for a date, or I bring the wrong color flowers, or there's a speck of my shoe that's not shined properly. I'm getting dropped like a pile of hot rocks. That's what happened to her. But anyway, I thought this conversation's worth hearing because just listen to the casual, unexamined, unself-critical, unself-aware that these two clowns, this conversation they're having, and it's all just one exchange after another about how white people suck, especially white people who like Trump, and how somehow this Jemele Hill is a hero because she got fired for saying stuff like that.
I want to talk to you about Super Bowl, but first, clear the air, because you know a lot of us are really in love with you for your sports commentary, but also your stand-up and expressing yourself. Were you forced out of Sports Center? Was that your choice?
This was definitely 100% my choice. I approached my superiors about making a change because, and maybe a lot of people probably didn't know this, but I spent the majority of my career in print journalism. ESPN hired me in 2006 to be a print columnist. And so I often, wrote commentary, especially about issues revolving around race and sports. And so The Undefeated is a natural home for me, given that it's a site about the intersection between sports, African Americans, race, culture. It meshes all those things that I think are even more vital now to discuss. And I wanted to do it on a platform that was deeply aligned with who I was as a person. I respect a lot of the great journalists of color that they have at this site, and just so many of those in charge of it. So it was just really an opportunity for me to do great journalism. And look, SportsCenter is the legacy brand at ESPN. I had a great year doing the show, but it was not a fit for me because ultimately I had a lot of things that I really wanted to say and wanted to express, and the SportsCenter vehicle is not necessarily set up for that. So I wanted to be on a property that was.
Now, how did you feel as one who expressed yourself on Twitter and has been expressing yourself throughout your career, because you are a journalist, you're not just somebody talking in between commercials about sports. How did you feel when you heard the president in a State of the Union address still take a shot at people that are standing up about injustices that you write about, I protest about? I mean, just out of nowhere, just decides he's going to take another shot. How did you feel watching that?
I wasn't surprised, and I think this is going to be probably a constant theme for the president because it's a very easy dog whistle. It's low-hanging fruit. It's what I like to call racial pornography because it's a way to stoke his base. And look, in a weird way, I think it's kind of weirdly brilliant because he has been able to hijack the entire conversation and to make this about patriotism. And really, if anybody knew just even the smallest bit of American history, they would understand that what the players have chosen to do is the most patriotic thing that you could. And Colin Kaepernick, who this conversation started with and still is very much the foundation of this conversation, his original thoughts about why he was protesting, he very clearly laid out a big reason is that he felt like military personnel, the people defending our country, that we were not living up to the ideals that flag is supposed to represent. And that's why he chose to take a knee at the request of someone else who served in the military, being Nate Boyer. So I think because there's a lot of misinformation, a lot of people, frankly, just aren't interested enough or care enough about the things that are important to Colin Kaepernick and to the players protesting. It's been easy for them to latch on to ceremony as opposed to understanding what this cause is really about.
And what it's really saying, and what we're saying when we pledge allegiance, we ought to pledge allegiance to what it stands for. Jamil, the fact that you will now be writing and expressing your views, I don't think a lot of people understand, as we are at Super Bowl Sunday today, the whole problem of race in sports. Like over 70% of the players are black. I mean, you have more players now black than ever, but the ownership is almost all lily white. I mean, we still have not dealt with the problem of ownership, of business contracts, of the race question in terms of equity in sports itself.
Yeah, and this is a tension that has existed in sports ever since black athletes integrated into sports that were largely white. Here you have black athletes performing, for the most part, at the large request for the entertainment of mostly whites, owned by primarily teams that are owned by primarily white owners. And so there's always going to be this tension of race there. And I think a lot of people that watch players, a lot of people that employ players, they don't understand the duality that most people of color live in this nation, of the duality of what you do versus who you are and what it means to be black in America, which is quite simply all the players are trying to express and get owners and even the league commissioner to understand that regardless of the fact that they may make a certain amount of money, that they may play in a great sport, and that they, are competitors, despite all that when they get in their cars, they're still subjected to much of the racism and institutional abuses as if though they didn't have the other trappings of success. And one way that the NFL certainly hasn't been able to address some of those issues is by the fact that you have primarily white owners in decision-making positions, not just at the ownership level, at the GM level. A lot of people making the decisions don't look like the players who are actually playing on the field.
Well, that's why I thought it was so important, so heroic what Colin Kaepernick did, and frankly what you did, because just because you own a team, you don't own a person. And I think that when someone has the courage to step out and stand up, we all need to stand and applaud that and let the owners know that there's backup. And I don't think you estimate the level of respect that it gives young women of all races and people of all races to say to people that, wait a minute, I'm a human being. I have feelings and I live in a reality that needs to be addressed.
Well, the way I view things is that, love is correction. And I love this country. I love being American. I love being a black American. And if I didn't love it as much, I wouldn't care about what it stood for or be disappointed by it. And I think that's kind of where Colin Kaepernick and I, where we're deeply aligned, is that he cares about this country. He cares about it living up to its ideals. And that's why it means a lot for him to continue to try to better it in the way that he can. And I know that a lot of people look at the money that he's made in his career, and for that matter, if they look at me and say, oh, you're on ESPN, what do you have to be concerned about? I'm still a black woman in America. That's not going to change.
Right.
And still subjected to a lot of things. And besides, with my platform, and I'm sure, again, he views it the same way, and you know this better than anybody, Reverend, given how long that you fought for social justice, is that those who are able to sort of get to this point, you almost feel a deeper responsibility to make sure that you allow others to stand on your shoulders, because we all had to stand on somebody else's shoulders at some point or at many points in our lives.
But let me ask you this. Give me a hint of what you think is going to happen at the Super Bowl tonight.
Well, I do think that this game is going to be a lot closer than people imagine it to be. The Patriots, obviously, one of the most dominant teams ever in sports. I think it'll be close, but I think they'll wind up winning and further cementing their legacy as one of the most winningest teams and franchises that we've ever seen. I think something maybe along the lines of 28-24. I do think this game will be a lot closer than some people probably have imagined.
Well, thank you again for being on, Jamil, and thank you, Jamil, for being Jamil Hill.
Thank you for being Reverend Al.
Coming up, I have a tip for President Trump.
You know, a second or two ago, we were talking about how all this stuff has consequences and how, you know, you and I, we can turn off the Reverend Al and Jamil Hill anytime we want, and we can keep those two out of our lives. But all of a sudden, they intrude into our lives in different ways when what they say penetrates our neighborhoods, our cities, our states. This poison penetrates the criminal justice system. The best example of that right now, well, I can't say the best because everybody's kind of like racing to be the best. To be the best example of black on white hostility in the criminal justice system. So we got the mayor of Philly, we got the district attorney of Philly, then Krasner, we got the district attorney, state's attorney of Cook County, Kimberly Fox, similar people in St. Louis, Corpus Christi, Oakland. There's a lot more. They're all like in this contest to see who can be down with the cause and who can get the most black people out of prison the quickest, the most quickly. Kimberly Fox is winning in this contest a lot of times. Just a couple weeks ago, there was a huge headline in Chicago that she was trumpeting as a major success of her administration, and lots of the fellows were trumpeting too, which said, there's only 6,000 people in jail in Chicago jails. That's an all-time historic low. Hooray! Kimberly's keeping her promises. She's letting all the black people out of prison and jail. Yes, I'm keeping my promises, Colin. I told you there were a lot of black people in jail for no reason whatsoever. We're not going to criminalize poverty. I know. You might sit here and say that sounds stupid. I will look you right in the eye and tell you that is the official policy of the District Attorney of Cook County, Kimberly Fox. This insanity is now writ large and writ institutionally and writ as if it is not crazy. It's writ as if it is not some example of black on white hostility gone institutional. I mean, one of the things Kim Fox talked about during her campaign was, you know, we got to stop criminalizing black people because white people do it too. So we just, you know, we just have to stop picking on black people for all this crime and violence. Because, hey, white people do it too. And you know what? If it happens to white people, well, let's face it. You and I both know they deserve it, right? But even in that context, there was one story in Chicago, a carjacking story. Carjacking is now a thing in Chicago. It's been a thing for a while, as we have reported on my videos, both on my minds.com/Colin Flaherty and YouTube site, which no longer exists. So we're over at minds.com/Colin Flaherty. And thanks all you guys for coming over there with me. So there's this one story. I just kind of had to go fish it out of my archives that I think it's worth playing here again because of one fact at the end. That if I didn't hear it on TV, if I didn't see a reporter tell me about it, if I didn't see a reporter telling me exactly what Kimberly, in action, in reality, what Kimberly Fox is promising, I kind of wouldn't believe it. Let's listen to the story to see if you can pick up what they said.
Judy and Rob, police still trying to figure out exactly how many of these carjackings from the last 2 days are the work of these two men. The victim in the latest one speaking to us earlier, telling us he was able to positively identify at least one of them to police earlier this afternoon.
Tengo miedo, por eso le pido un poquito más protección.
I'm afraid. I never thought this would happen to me. Agreeing only to let us shoot his feet, the victim of the latest carjacking recounts his harrowing experience last night. His vehicle taken at gunpoint on the 800 block of North Racine. Keep an eye on the top left-hand side of the screen. The victim seen here trying to park his white Jeep, not knowing he's about to be robbed. The suspects, also in a white Jeep, are right behind him. They turn into the alley, stalking him. The incident itself is not caught on the surveillance tape, but this is where it ended, with two of the suspects crashing one of the two stolen Jeeps on the Eisenhower. Police having located them minutes earlier, hot on their tail.
Males are on foot on the L tracks? Just cross the Eisenhower. Just cross the Eisenhower. In the grass. Get the helicopter off.
Following a short foot chase, both men were caught. Police telling us they believe they are part of a group of at least three responsible for a string of carjackings and robberies on the west and northwest side of the city over the last couple of days.
Our carjacking arrests are up from previous years, so I don't think right now the issue is so much arresting them, it's more holding them accountable.
While both men arrested last night are adults, police say a large number of carjackings in the city are the work of juveniles, most of whom, when caught, are charged with a misdemeanor and quickly released. Police say a large number of carjackings in the city are the work of juveniles, most of whom, when caught, are charged with a misdemeanor and quickly released. It's a subject CPD says they plan to address in an upcoming meeting with Cook County State's Attorney Kimberly Fox.
Juvenile justice is a complex issue. You know, we recognize that their minds are not fully developed, but at the same time, there has to be a consequence for those actions.
700 plus carjackings have taken place in the city of Chicago so far this year. And while the superintendent would not go into details, he did admit that detectives are targeting specific high schools where they know that several of the repeat offenders attend.
Okay, so the reporter says carjacking in Chicago is now being treated as a misdemeanor. I had some aspiring legal beagle, when we first did the story, a couple of them wrote me letters going, "No, Colin, I check the statutes. Carjacking in Chicago is still a felony." Look, your legal beagle outlook doesn't mean a thing to me. What means something is the reality of who's getting charged with what for what crime. And right now in Chicago, carjacking is a misdemeanor because that's what they're charging people with. Because we're not going to criminalize poverty, and we're not going to criminalize a whole bunch of black people for no damn reason whatsoever other than carjacking. No, that's not happening on my watch. They've told us this many times. I don't have any use in playing these little amateur legal games with people. Here we deal with reality, not your legalistic fictions. And the reality is, black criminality is now being decriminalized in Chicago. Black criminality is the new black entitlement. And here's the story that has cops in Chicago going crazy right now. This comes from Second City Cop, but these cop blog, but they report what's in the papers and they kind of give some of the rest of the story. Had a bunch of cops from Chicago send me this. Less than 2 days after 3 teens were arrested for trying to steal the car of a retired Chicago cop, one of them was in trouble with the law again. 7 o'clock on Friday, a retired cop spotted a young man jump into a car when he was about to check in at the Doubletree Hotel in Streeterville. Fobbs chased his car. The retired cop, chased his car, yanked the teenager out, pinned him to the ground. The suspect's accomplices then tried to run him over. But because several witnesses helped stop the car, they were arrested on felony charges, blah, blah, blah. But they were charged with a felony. But that means when they go to court, it won't be a felony anymore. Chicago police spokesman said all 3 suspects were released to their parents. But on Sunday night, one of them was arrested again when he was caught with a gun in another stolen car in Englewood. And now the Chicago cops are hear that the police in Chicago are asking for federal assistance in stopping this epidemic of carjackings in Chicago. So they're getting federal assistance, state assistance from all these different law enforcement agencies. And so nobody's going to bell the cat. Nobody's going to step up and say, hey, what happens to the carjackers that you already catch? Do you put them away for any period of time? You don't? You let them go? You charge them with a misdemeanor? Why do you do that? Because crime is a new black entitlement? Because charging black people with crimes, that's not really what you promised to do? Kimberly Fox, who was also supported by lots of Soros money and by lots of enthusiastic endorsements from Black Lives Matter. So now we have a district attorney who stated, they're not hiding anything, her stated policy is we're going to start letting black people out of prison, out of jail. We're going to start charging them with lesser offenses. Crime goes up. And they bring in the feds as if somehow the feds are going to be, to coin a phrase, or the feds are going to be able to wave a magic wand that will overcome this ridiculous level of racial hostility, which makes the district attorney undercharge black people caught for carjacking. The feds are going to stop that somehow. The National Guard is going to stop that somehow. I think the National Guard is trained to stop carjackers. I know a lot of guys in the National Guard. They work in hospitals as computer technicians. They're store clerks. They're teachers. There's doctors. They're lawyers. They're Indian chiefs. They're butchers. They're bakers. They're candlestick makers. They don't know anything about police work. The cops aren't going to solve any problem if the judges and district attorneys keep putting criminals back on the streets. There is no police solution to that problem because the cops didn't cause that problem. The judges and the district attorney did, all motivated by a ridiculous level of black on white racial hostility that they're not shy about expressing in Chicago. These are all just recent examples, black on white hostility. If we wanted to go back 3, 4, 5 days, we could make this podcast 3, 4, 5 times longer. But I think the question a lot of people ask on this podcast and on videos and on my books, okay, what can we do? And I don't have a good answer for what you can do other than take these examples we're giving to you and show them to your friends and just say, ask them to explain what's going on. We don't have to be in a hurry to explain it. We don't have to be in a hurry to justify it. It's not us that's doing it. If your friends can't get their minds around the whole idea of black on white hostility, let them explain some of these stories to you. Why is Kim Fox decriminalizing black crime in Chicago? That's probably actually a provocative way to put it, but I don't do that. Why are all these people printing these stories about the birthday of Trayvon Martin? Does that not seem weird to you? There's so many questions we can ask. So much material that we have for showing this enormous level of black and white hostility, for showing that, for illustrating the greatest lie of our generation, the greatest hoax of our lifetime, the myth of black victimization, and how reporters and public officials are in denial, deceit, and delusion about it. So much material. This is just a starting point. This is tip of the iceberg. I notice sometimes when people first come to our channels, to this podcast and to myminds.com channel, they kind of get in there enthusiastically and, oh, this is great, Colin. Thanks, man. You're saving the world. Thanks, Colin. The next thing you know, they're putting on obscure YouTube videotapes from 1946 about cultural Marxism and how this is all the plan of some Soviet agent from 1946. Do you think that's going to convince your neighbor? Do you think that's going to convince anybody that's not convinced already? I mean, the people we really want to talk to, I don't know, just informally, I think there's about 10 to 15 to 20% of people who kind of open their eyes on this and they're completely aware of what's going on and they don't mind saying anything. Then there's another people at the other end, the Black Lives Matter crowd, maybe in the same numbers, who they know that the minute they stopped haranguing, threatening, and cajoling people into accepting the biggest lie of our lifetime, the one they are telling, well, they know their game is up. So they keep telling it more loudly and loudly and loudly. As the black criminality expands, so does their level of deception. Hey, Colin, crime's down. Can't you read the numbers, Colin? Well, crime's down. Why are there so many places like Tampa, Baltimore, and Chicago where the people look in the camera and going, hey, this is out of control. We need federal help. Why is that? Cleveland, Cincinnati, Philadelphia. Why is that? Milwaukee. Detroit. That's too easy. Memphis. Kansas City, St. Louis, New Orleans. It's like a magical mystery tour. You just kind of go up and down, up and down. As we get to further west, maybe it gets a little sparser. Louisville. Why are so many people in these towns looking in the camera and going, hey, what's going on in our town? Why is there so much black criminality? Why is there so much denial? Why are people so afraid to point their finger at it and say that's what's happening? Don't we have a plan to knock this crime down? Don't we have a plan to make our neighborhoods and our cities safe? Don't we have a plan that works a little bit better than not making the black kids angry?